Nearly a decade ago, the final Harry Potter film, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, released in cinemas, marking an end to one of the most beloved film franchises out there. However, the most amazing thing about the films is that they all stuck the landing. They're all well liked, and every single film has had pretty good reception from fans and critics alike. Oh. Anyway, as a fun little video, I thought I'd try and go through each Harry Potter movie and pick out the scenes and moments that I'm personally drawn to the most. This could be because of anything, from emotion, to filmmaking, to story impact, to how memorable it is. I'll be mentioning one scene per movie, as well as a few honourable mentions for each installment. I also think it's worth mentioning that there'll be heavy spoilers in this video, and with all that said, let's begin. Starting off, we have got The Philosopher's Stone, and this movie is hugely important in the series, because it's basically the one that started off the whole series. Its magic captured everyone right from the start. So immediately when I was thinking of deciding this one, I gravitated towards a lot of the bigger introduction sequences. So for that reason, my honourable mentions are going to be Harry's arrival at Diagon Alley and his arrival at Hogwarts. Both of them I'm kind of just going to include in one because they're quite similar. It's a magical location that Harry is being introduced to. They basically succeed for the same reasons. I think there's some really good camera work in here. I think they get the scale spot on. The wonder captured in Harry, I think, is done fantastically. The music's great. There's just such a big atmosphere, and I think the production value is really good on those scenes. So for that reason, I think they've got to be honourable mentions. However, when I was really thinking about it, whilst these scenes immediately stick out to me, they aren't really the reason that the movie works. In fact, the whole Harry Potter series really only works because it's grounded in the character of Harry himself. He's experiencing this new world for himself, and he's experiencing it quite alone. So because of that, I was thinking, what is a scene that properly encapsulates everything that Harry is going through? And to that, I bring you to the Mirror of Erised scene. Now, it's already just come off a tense sequence of events. So we get a nice, slow change of pace, and we have a very bittersweet sort of scene going on here. I think that it's very atmospheric, and it's able to be so warm yet so cold as well. Just the idea of a boy who has never met his parents before seeing them in a mirror is really heartwarming, but at the same time you can really see him longing for them and it not really changing anything. It's really heartfelt, and it really does make us connect with Harry's character. I think for that reason alone it's got to be included here. But if you want a couple of other reasons, I really like the set here, I really like a lot of the lighting, and I think Daniel Radcliffe gives an excellent performance in this scene. So for that reason, I've got to include it as my pick for the best moment in The Philosopher's Stone. Next, we move on to Chamber of Secrets, which I personally think is the most underrated film in the series. Why? Because I think it did a really solid job at fixing a lot of the main problems I had with the first movie. However, in doing so, it also never quite hit the same highs. So because of that, it was really difficult to find one standout scene. However, what I will say is that I did really appreciate the addition of this murder mystery plotline. And on the subject of additions, this is where my first honourable mention comes in. I really like Lockhart, so I'm going to include his first lesson as an honourable mention. It just brings a smile to my face every time I see it, and I wanted to include some sort of Lockhart scene, so I chose to do this one. I think that Kenneth Branagh is always really charming as Lockhart, and I think this just captures the fun atmosphere of the first two movies really well. My other honourable mention is much in the vein to what I said with the first movie, which is Harry being introduced to magical things. In this case, it's his arrival at the Burrow. I just really like the idea of seeing what a normal wizarding family lives like, since we never really see a wizarding household quite like this again in the series. Another thing that I think really stands out is I really like being introduced to all the Weasleys and the dynamics they have with each other. I do like all of these introductions, however, in my opinion, when they come together, it's where you really see the fruition of all of this build-up. And in that case, it has to be Harry's encounter with Tom Riddle in the Chamber of Secrets. What a great finale. Everything had been building up to this moment, and everything just piled on perfectly. Basically, this sort of goofy plot, and I do like it, the light-hearted nature of these movies, is basically put on hold, as the plot can basically resolve itself in a really satisfying way. The Chamber of Secrets itself has some amazing production design. It looks so grimy and real. There's some really strong stakes in this scene. I really like the idea of Tom Riddle's reveal as Lord Voldemort by him literally just rearranging his letters by magic. Minor thing, I know, but it's really cool visually. There's a lot of tension in this sequence. John Williams' score is forever incredible, and I think this is probably the bravest we ever get Harry, and because of that, it's one hell of a showdown. And I just realised in editing that I never talked about the basilisk. Oh my god, what an amazing practical effect. Yeah, this is just such a solid finale to the movie. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is my favourite film in the series, and for that reason, picking just 3 scenes was so difficult. I absolutely love this movie, and I had about 10 scenes that I wanted to mention here. So coming up with just 3 was incredibly hard. However, my first honourable mention is going to have to be the Buckbeak's flight scene. I mean, this is just a beautiful scene to look at. I know Alfonso Cuarón really wanted to show off what Hogwarts looked like in its layout, and I think he did a marvellous job here. It's just a really peaceful and just such a nice sequence that has so much energy, yet so much art put into it. Another scene that I thought was fantastic was Harry's scene with the Dementor, just because, Christ, those things are scary. This is the closest Harry Potter ever got to a horror movie, and I think they absolutely nailed the look and feel of the Dementors. My main pick for Prisoner of Azkaban is going to have to be this scene which I only really noticed during rewatch, which is a moment of Harry and Lupin standing on a bridge. They start talking about Dementors, and then the conversation changes to Harry's parents. And once again, it's just a really heartfelt scene. You can see the 2 characters are clearly connecting over their relationships to Lily and James, and the way that this is told visually is masterful. The way that the pieces of wood and the lighting are able to frame both Harry and Lupin in one take to display their various emotions and thoughts with each other is just some genius direction here. I think that the acting from both David Thewlis and Daniel Radcliffe is brilliant. I know I keep on saying it, but John Williams is a master as always, but by far the most touching thing about this scene is that it didn't need to be in the movie, but at the same time it was also completely necessary. A scene like this isn't important to the plot, but it is very important for its characters, because it establishes where Harry and Lupin's characters lie at this current moment, and how their feelings towards each other can change within one conversation. And we can see this from some brilliant framing. Its entire objective was just character development, and I think it did it wonderfully. I don't think Harry and Lupin's moments with each other or with other characters would be nearly as effective if a scene like this didn't exist. The Goblet of Fire is a mean movie. It's got really extreme performances, some pretty grey lighting, and as a whole it's a very dark movie. And because of that, I'm going to jump straight to my main choice, and that is Voldemort's Return. Because, Jesus Christ, this is terrifying. I think it really signalled a turning point in the Harry Potter franchise. It sort of signalled the end of the fun malarkey that we saw with the first 3 movies, and it signalled the beginning of the Second Wizarding War, which you would see done later in the second half of the series. As well as that, this is the first proper death we get in Harry Potter. One of the good guys gets murdered in front of Harry's eyes. And speaking of which, I'm going to quickly include in here an honourable mention for the people discovering that Cedric Diggory has died. I think that scene is truly heartbreaking, and I think it's really powerful. Anyway, back to the graveyard scene. Cedric's dead, and that was pretty shocking. But what happens then is Voldemort comes back to life, and the effects they use to bring him back are amazing. And you can tell that Ralph Fiennes is having so much fun with the script and with the direction and with everything here. Other standouts are Daniel Radcliffe and Timothy Spall, who both completely sell the terrifying nature of the scene we're in. As a whole, it's just got this really dark atmosphere where there's so much pounding tension and worry going on through here. Harry's in uncharted territory, and we really don't know how he's going to get out of this. He's very much at risk of dying or death. He's just been cut and is bleeding, he's caught behind a statue, and his worst enemy is now back to life. And the fear that this scene creates is just so strong that I think I had to include it as the number one choice, because it signified such a big change in the series and it absolutely nailed it. The other scene I wanted to include as an honourable mention was Mad-Eye Moody's first lesson. I think Brendan Gleeson is really good as Moody, and it still is able to get a nice mix between the light-hearted nature of Harry Potter and its darker themes. Order of the Phoenix is one hell of a movie. It was the longest book in the series, and stylistically it feels very different, incorporating various montages and different colour palettes to the movie. On the subject of those montages, I don't know whether you count those montages as scenes exactly, so for that reason, as an honourable mention, I'm going to quickly shout out the Dumbledore's Army montage, where Dumbledore's army is learning all of their magic, meanwhile Umbridge and the Inquisitorial Squad are trying to stop them from learning. Ultimately, I just feel like it was really well edited, really well paced. I think it captured a lot of some really fun stuff in there while also giving us a lot of information. I think it's what a montage should be used for, however it never felt exactly generic. And because of that, this learning process just felt really fresh. The other honourable mention I have is from one of my favourite characters in the series, Sirius Black. This is the Black Family Tree section. For starters, it gives us a lot of information about the Black family, and it sets up Bellatrix and Sirius's estrangement from the Black family, which is all really cool. But then towards the end, Harry is really doubting whether or not he is the hero of the story. He's really unsure whether Voldemort is getting the better of him. These are really challenging questions, however Sirius, being the godfather he is, gives us one of the most heartwarming pieces of advice ever.
You're not a bad person. You're a very good person who bad things have happened to.
It was a very emotionally charged scene that really needed to happen, however, let's face it. If you weren't excited while watching this scene, you're not a Harry Potter fan. My main choice for the best scene of this movie has got to be Dumbledore versus Voldemort. Oh god. The two most powerful wizards of all time facing against each other, good versus evil, for the stakes of the wizarding world. Coming off the back of the gut-wrenching death of Sirius, Harry then chases after Bellatrix and threatens to torch her, until Dumbledore shows up and Voldemort shows up, and then we have an awesome duel of massive proportions. I love this sequence. For one, I think the use of the Ministry of Magic is a really cool setting here, and because it's a film and because it's magic, so many amazing visuals and types of fighting can be done, and because it's the two most powerful wizards ever, there really isn't any limit to what we can see from this. There's fire, there's water, but better than that, it's taking Harry's perspective. We're seeing all of this destruction and chaos occur from Harry's eyes. As well as this, at the very end, Voldemort then possesses Harry, and Harry has to basically fight off Voldemort in his head. And this was, in my opinion, better done in the film than it was in the books. I really like the reason Harry has to defeat Voldemort from this. It's very strong stuff, and it shows a lot of resilience from Harry. I'd say this is once again one of his defining moments, but just wow, what a massive finale. Now, Half-Blood Prince is an interesting one because this had a lot of amazing scenes in the books that they didn't put in the film. And likewise, there are some scenes that they deleted which are also really good that they didn't put in the film. In fact, screw it, it's not even in the movie, but this scene gets an honourable mention.
Don't worry, really there.
I'm not worried, Harry.
The other honourable mention was really hard to find, however in the end I went for the Weasleys Wizard Wheezes. Why? Well, similar to what Harry, Ron and Hermione say in Diagon Alley, you just need a laugh every now and again. For a very dark and moody and grey film, it was nice to just have a bit of fun for once in the film. Seeing Fred and George again is always fun, seeing all this magical joke stuff is a really cool idea, and yeah, a lot of effort was put into the production design of this scene. But now onto what my main choice was, and that was Harry versus Draco, which may surprise a lot of you. However, I'll explain as best as I can as to why I love this scene so much. It's because it represents a breaking point in both of these characters. These rivals have essentially built to this point, their full-on duel, their full-on confrontation. Draco is at his breaking point, crying over the bad things that he's done for Lord Voldemort. Meanwhile, Harry is currently at the climax of his storyline with Half-Blood Prince, finally realising the bad things that have been done. In a spurt of rage, Harry casts a very deadly spell, and you can immediately see the regret over him. It teaches us a lot about action and consequence. It's a pretty exciting action scene, and for once the grey colour palette actually makes a lot of sense. But ultimately, it's just this core emotion that drives the whole scene. Hence, because of that, I had to put it as my favourite scene in The Half-Blood Prince. Deathly Hallows is an outright war between Harry and Voldemort, and I think that this war element and seeing these characters really lose is where the film is its strongest. Because of that, I first want to talk about the Battle of the Seven Potters over London, because there's a lot of collateral damage here. It's really interesting seeing wizards and the muggles combined together, plus it really gives us a taste of some thrilling action that's going to happen later on across the story. On the complete opposite end, I also want to shout out The Tale of the Three Brothers, which has beautiful animation going on in it to tell this story within a story. It's a really nice change of pace, it's really important information to be given to us, and it's just some really nice storytelling. But ultimately, my favourite scene in part 1 is one that immediately came to me, and that has got to be Harry and Ron disagreeing, falling out, and eventually Ron leaving. This is such a powerful scene because with Harry and Draco breaking and falling apart, these are two rivals. However, seeing two best friends do the same thing is honestly heartbreaking, and it's completely sold by Daniel Radcliffe and Rupert Grint, who are acting the hell out of it. This is definitely the best performance Rupert Grint has ever done in the series, and Daniel Radcliffe is fantastic as well. Not many people talk about Emma Watson as well, but she's equally good in that scene and is a really good mediator. Ultimately, there's just some fantastic dialogue, some really good tension, but it's just, yet again, the breaking point of these characters, and it just made for such a heartbreaking scene. Did it have lasting consequences? Well, yes and no. It had consequences that were then undone, but I think that's more just the strength of Ron's character arc. Deathly Hallows Part 2 was a perfect finale. It wrapped up everything in a ridiculously satisfying way, and I think that's mainly due to its fantastic breakneck pace. Unfortunately, because of that breakneck pace, a lot of the moments in this movie are incredibly short, which made it very difficult for me to choose one out specifically. My first honourable mention is the Battle of Hogwarts. For one, it's actually really sad seeing Hogwarts get destroyed by this. However, a lot of effort has gone into the effects, the CGI, all the modelling and the practical effects. It feels like a really satisfying battle that's shown its toll, and the pounding score, some great and varied action. Another scene that I want to talk about is the Prince's Tale. Now, this isn't really a scene exactly, however, if I would, it would be Snape confronting Dumbledore about the fact that Harry has to die. It's a really tragic reveal on the behalf of Snape, but I think it was done beautifully. I think that there's so much emotional strength in this, a lot of information that's conveyed to us really well. There's some great editing, some phenomenal acting from Alan Rickman in this. It's just a standout moment of the film. However, the other standout moment in the film has got to be Harry giving his life to save everyone else, which isn't just a standout moment in the film, but it's a standout moment in the entire series. It's really what it was building to. Harry dying so that everyone else could live. Harry dying so that Voldemort could die. And this scene was handled phenomenally. The sound mixing, I think, was really smart here. The directing was laser focused on Daniel Radcliffe, which I think it absolutely should have been. Harry saying goodbye to his parents and Sirius and Lupin just before was really heartfelt. By far, it was the biggest test that Harry would ever have to go through, and it was great to see it done wonderfully. And that's it for the video. Comment down below some of your favourite Harry Potter moments down there, and while you're down there, be sure to like and subscribe this video. In addition to that, tell me down in the comments below what sort of videos or what video ideas you have for me in the future. But in the meantime, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.